This program does not provide medical advice. We assume no liability for the information provided on Mind Force Radio. Please consult your physician before beginning any exercise or nutrition program.
Attention all serious natural lifters. Remember these two great websites, physicalculturebooks.com and webstrengthcoach.com. Write them down and visit them often. physicalculturebooks.com and webstrengthcoach.com.
From Mind Force Radio, this is Natural Strength Night with Maximum Bob. On Natural Strength Night, we don't talk about the other things Bob likes to talk about. Tonight, we only talk strength training. When I say strength training, I don't mean training like punk-ass goons in the muscle magazines who jacked up on juice, steroids, and PEDs. I mean natural strength. Strength built on good food, heavy weights, and no shortcuts. If you want to learn about real natural strength, weight training the right way, the old school way, stick around. Bob and his friends just might teach you something.
He's here, the host of Natural Strength Night, Maximum Bob Whelan.
Tonight, we welcome back my good friend, Dick Connor. Dick has been a regular on the show and was on the very first episode of Natural Strength Night, as well as episodes 2, 4, 6, 17, and 25. I've known Dick for over 20 years. I love the guy. We talk frequently and rarely have a conversation that is less than an hour long. Dick made the long drive from Indiana to Washington, D.C. to be a speaker at several of my capital city strength clinics. Dick is one of the most honest, nicest, and funniest guys in the field. He's been involved in strength training for over 60 years, and he has a treasure trove of knowledge. We're going to be picking Dick's brain tonight about some of the many places and colorful Iron Game individuals he has met over the years. Dick is the founder of the famous Pit Gym in Indiana and is one of the greatest powerlifting coaches of all time. Dick's Pit Gym powerlifting team won 19 state championships and 9 national championships. The team traveled all over the country to meet any challenger. Dick has written many articles for hardgainer-magazine and naturalstrength.com. Dick also wrote a great chapter for Iron Nation. Dick is still at the pit a few days every week. If you're going to be anywhere near Evansville, Indiana, you need to go get a workout with Dick. To contact Dick, visit the website, thepitbarbellclub.com. Dick, buddy, thanks for your time and welcome back to Natural Strength Night.
It's always good to talk to you, Bob. You got more enthusiasm than I think a guy should have sometimes, but you love what you're doing, and I know you love weightlifting, and of course, that's really what it's all about. You got to like doing it. It'll become. It's not something that you do because you got to do it. It's something you do because you love to do it.
I definitely love doing it. No, thanks a lot, Dick. I appreciate that. Recently, you told me that you visited Arthur Jones in the late 60s and early 70s. Please tell us about that.
Well, Iron Man magazine was one of the first magazines to ever say anything about Arthur Jones. And I think the reason that I made a decision in the direction of Arthur Jones was because of that time in my life and the history of what I had done to myself. And also I was training several people even at that time. And when I read about what Arthur Jones had to say, it made a lot of sense to me. Now, today I would say Arthur Jones was not what I thought he was either, but he himself changed over a period of time. And we might get into what I mean by that, but Arthur Jones at that time I felt was one of the best. And, so it's a long drive. It's a heck of a story. I mean, if you want to hear it, here's how it got started. I should have known about bodybuilding because I trained at Bill Pearl's gym for long enough to have seen some really I've seen the world-class bodybuilders at that time. Of course, Bill Pearl was the best in the world at that time. And I'm talking about in the early 50s and middle 50s and what have you. But and Leo Stern's gym down in San Diego also had Bill Glummick, and he was one of the best, and Mr. America competitor. And of course, Mr. America was a big deal back then. But anyway, I'm training these guys in my basement. I had a couple of them that really looked good to me. I had a kid that was about 5'8", 185. He could bench around 360, real legitimate. And he really looked good to me, but I had forgot what a really good bodybuilder looked like, and I didn't know at that time about steroids. Now, I'm talking up in the early 60s, you know, and and middle 60s, and most people don't realize probably that even steroids were back then, and even further back, but anyway, I thought these guys we ought to go to the Mr. Indiana contest. Well, we should have went to something a little littler. But anyway, I like training guys. These guys thought they were bodybuilders, so we went to the Mr. Indiana contest. And when they didn't do too well, but I had a kid who was reading an Ironman magazine, had a picture of Sergio Oliva sitting on a pullover machine. And it was an outstanding picture in that day. Even today it would be pretty outstanding. But this kid said, we need one of these machines. I said, are you kidding me? I said, my wife, which was my ex-wife now, said, you know, she was going through me, and I kept dragging kids into that gym. I was a policeman, and I got to know kids, and and pretty soon, and I trained them for nothing back then. And I got my basement full of a bunch of kids, and I'm talking about high school kids, and, you know, they're football players and that sort of thing. But anyway, I said, you kidding me? Well, anyway, when the contest was over, we got beat so bad, my guys did, I thought, well, maybe we do need some of these machines. Now, that's Saturday. So being typical of a weightlifter, a good weightlifter is impulsive. He'll jump right in the middle of anything. The rest of them I ain't got no use for because they got too much good sense. A good weightlifter just
so you just jumped in the car and went to Deland.
Very close. I got two very young children. I got a brand new house, and I'm a policeman, and I'm trying to make it. Well, I decided I got to have some of them machines in the basement. We got to get some of those machines. But these things are expensive. And there was no advertisement on how to get them. I just figured you could drive down there and get some. So I started working Monday on how I'm going to get some money. Well, I talked to my dad. He kind of said, well, you're not lazy, but I wish you'd be interested in something that's worth being interesting in. I finally worked with him, and I had another piece of money that I shouldn't have taken to do that with, but I said, well, I'm going to go down and buy some machines. And so I tell these guys, and we get in the car, and this is the very next week. I'm a police officer, and my lieutenant, I trained his son. So I said, look, I need to get, for his son, he'd do anything. So anyway, we take off to Florida. Now, it was the next week. It was probably Wednesday. So we go to Deland, and we get there, and I'm expecting to see a big manufacturing place. And it's a little old building, wasn't nothing. And I thought, my goodness, what is this? And anyway, we walk in, or I walk in first. Arthur Jones' reputation was already in the group of people that I was with. The kids I was with, they heard about him. And anyway, and when we walk in this little building, no bigger than this condo I live in, at the most, probably not as big. Arthur Jones is talking on the phone.
You told me, I think, didn't you tell me once before it was about the size of a gas station, if that, maybe smaller?
Well, it reminded me of that sort of a thing. Yeah, you got all kinds of sizes in gas stations now, but it was about like that. And I walk in and I park my junky car out front, And Arthur Jones is on the telephone, and I never will forget what he said. He says, and I ain't going to say what he said, complete. He says, if you want a so-and-so answer, he says, send me $50 and I'll tell you the answer. And slammed the phone down, turned and looked, and it wasn't very big, but he was certainly an intimidating man. I mean, he had, if you've read about him later, I never knew that, his background, with animals and all the things. He was certainly a genius, certainly a guy that, there's certain things you'd have to respect about him, even if you didn't like him. And certainly as a police officer for 25 years, and I rode the inner city all the time. I rode where the tough guys were because I had a good deal if I did that. And he was, as a police officer, I could recognize a guy that was bad news if you mess with him. And you could tell he was. He said, for you boys, and of course I was a grown man, he said, if you want to talk to me, get in that old Cadillac out there. So we just turned around and went back and sat down in the Cadillac. A little bit later, here comes Arthur Jones. He gets in the car, and he don't shut his mouth, and we just sit there and listen. And he went to different places where he was having these machines made. Then I was told, you can't buy these machines. You got to put 50% down. It takes 90 days to get them. You come back and get them. So anyway, Kim Wood was down there. He was a young man. And he told Kim Wood while he was there, he says, take these guys over to the high school. There was a high school over there where they had a big steel building, like the old Army buildings, Quonset hut type thing. And he had some of the machines in there, and I watched him, some people in there working out. And the thing that impressed me the most, though, was Arthur Jones's son. I think he was probably around 16. He walked over to a squat rack. It was, and I don't remember how much was on there, but it was a good squat. And this guy went down with the weight. Well, he wasn't that big, and he literally sat on the floor with it. And I started to run to him to help him. And old Kim Wood grabbed me and says, "Wait a minute." He says, "He'll come back up." He says, "He's just showing off." And bigger than heck, man, he come back up with it. Impressed me.
That was Gary Jones, right?
Yeah, right, who later ran, or later designed Hammer Strength.
Right.
But
and how much weight did he have on the bar when he did that?
I really don't know. I would think he was around 16. I don't know, but I want to say something. I mean, he sit on the floor. Wow. I mean, it just like an Olympic lifter. You've seen pictures of it, or if you've seen Olympic lifters, they get literally on the floor. At times, and he was down there like that. But I would say he had somewhere between 200 and 300 pounds.
Wow!
And like I said, he wasn't that big, but neither was Arthur. But most people don't realize how strong Arthur was and his intensity level. I understood that even Dick Butkus, Dick Butkus was his buddy,
right?
And I was down there one time when Dick Butkus was there, and Dick Butkus trained or worked for him, and he had, Arthur Jones could train with those guys. There's no getting around it when he wanted to. But anyway, that was my introduction, and so on and so forth. Until I come home and left 50% of my money down there, and I didn't know. I mean, there was no way that I could done anything if he had called me and said, we're out of business, or we're not in business or nothing. I just left my money with him. I don't even remember getting a receipt, but lo and behold, about 90 days, he calls me up. The bad thing, my car broke down. And I didn't get down there when I was supposed to, and so he calls me up. Arthur Jones did. He says, if you don't get down here, he said, I'm going to sell this stuff, and you're going to be put back on the list. It's going to be 90 days again for you. I says, I'll be there as quick as I can get there, and I will. And so I took off. Got me a trailer. Got a trailer when I was down there, and I got my car fixed and got down there and put these. It was a pullover, a pull down, a hip and back, and a leg extensions. And we had a leg press, homemade leg press in my basement. And when I get home with the pullover, I told Arthur, that's pretty tall. He says, I forget exact words, something like this. He said, we've considered all the factors. In other words, it'll work. And I said, okay. So I get home. Now, this house is not over a year old. And my ex-wife was a nurse, so we made enough money to make it, although with 2 young children, one right after another. My girls were only about a year apart. And so we had these young children, and we didn't know the future, and so on and so forth. But here I come in with these machines. Well, getting the pullover down the basement was almost unbelievable because it wasn't wide enough. So if I remember right, I tore up part of the wall, and then when I get down with the pull down, it's too tall. So I got me a sledge, and I started beating a hole in the concrete. I beat a hole in the concrete big enough to set that machine down in it. Done some concrete work at the bottom, got that machine down in it. In other words, I got a hole in my basement now. I ought to consider what might happen with water, because you know how basements are. But anyway, that's how the pullover machine was set up, and so I had to go down. I had to bust all the way through the concrete and then do some rework and got it. Fixed some bolts down there and set it up. So we went to work following some of Arthur Jones's beliefs. Of course, all of it worked, but we way overtrained. I mean, I had guys get so sick because our leg routine was a kind of a non-stop. I mean, we didn't want you stopping. If you did, it was usually because you were sick. But we do like 8 exercises for the legs. I wouldn't do that many exercises for the legs. In 2 weeks now that we done in one workout 2 or 3 times a week, But that's what we believed, and we believed the knowledge machines were going to change the whole world, and they did as far as introducing machines, into weightlifting, and of course I met Arthur Jones again later, and Dr. Ellington Darden was down there. I'll never forget going down there one time. Right? No, I never talked to Ken Leisner. If I seen him, I don't even remember. Kim Wood, Ellington Darden, and Arthur Jones, and of course Gary Jones is the only ones. And of course, like I said, we run into Dick Butkus, got introduced to him, and so on and so forth. But the place was probably one of the most interesting places in the world at one time because of all the pro athletes that were there. There'd be baseball players and just all kind of people there. Kim was pretty sharp, Kim was a second in the state in high school wrestling in Illinois, and he played. I don't know if he wrestled in college or not, but he played football, and he may have wrestled one or the other for Wisconsin. And he's a sharp guy, and I'm sure he could buy and sell me about 50 times. He was smart enough to know that Arthur Jones was going places. He recognized that probably as early as anybody. And so he was on Arthur Jones's side. Now, he's a tough guy. I don't one-on-one. Arthur Jones had no business with him, in my opinion. But I remember he dropped a cigarette, and Kim jumped there and picked it up real quick and handed it to him. But I looked at Arthur Jones like this, and Kim Wood, I think, recognized it young. Like all these real wealthy guys that get there, they're almost like they're nothing, and then all at once, like the computer world and these people, if you hang with them, stay with them, they'll make a millionaire out of you. And of course, in Kim Wood's case, again, that's what happened. He, without a doubt, is a multimillionaire, and I like the guy. Over the years, I got to know him. And got to know him through Hammer Strength more than I did down there. He certainly don't put on any airs if you've ever met him. He dresses about as common as you could. You wouldn't know that he had a nickel. And, in fact, a buddy of mine, I said, what do you think about Kim, the way he dresses? If you seen him out on the street. He said, well, I'd probably say, do you... Or he said, I'd probably think, here comes a guy wanting $1 or something, because he just dresses like, like he don't care about nothing. He sort of don't try to prove anything, and so on and so forth. He's an old Chicago boy, tough guy, and so on. And Arthur Jones, But he knew, and Arthur Jones is that kind of guy. He wanted loyalty beyond, that's the way them people are. And I wished I'd have been smart enough.
Tell us about your many visits that you made to Hammer Strength headquarters in Cincinnati.
Well, if you've never been there, it was a fantastic gym. I mean, they built a gym as a show place for Hammer Strength. But I remember the first time that I ever heard about Hammer Strength, Kim Wood invited over a lot of people who had been, that he knew and that was in the gym business, to a dinner and if I remember right, even a breakfast, and they have all these speakers. And Ken Leisner was one of the guys who was there that spoke, and Kim Wood and other guys. I think the strength coach I can't remember his name, from Michigan, real good buddy of, he was strength coach for years at Michigan, buddy of Kim Wood's, and other guys spoke at this thing. But anyway, I didn't even know what it was, and I asked the guy, I says, what's this? They invite us over. This is a real old hotel, world-class hotel, beautiful place. And inside there was Hammer Strength. I was going to be Hammer Strength. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It wasn't nothing at that time. I says, what's this all about, to this guy who was also invited? He said, I don't know. They tell us they have these speakers, and then all at once in the middle of this speaking, or somewhere thereabouts, he said, they start talking about this new Hammer Strength. They're going to build this machine. And that Gary Jones had come over from Nautilus to be their designer, and they were going to build these things. And so I thought, no, man, are you kidding me? I thought, the whole world's flooded with machines. Ain't nobody going to buy this stuff. Well, again, there I was. Kim Wood and the guy who owns the Cincinnati Bengals, Pete Brown, went into business, and it was a fantastic thing, and Hammer Strength is a good machine, still to this day. You couldn't tear one up if you dropped it off a building, and so on and so forth. But that's how we got introduced to Hammer Strength, which I thought wouldn't be nothing. And then later on, when I went back and bought some Hammer Strength machines and seen they had set this gym up with all these Hammer Strength machines, and he had all kind of other things there. Kim Wood had a tremendous thousands upon thousands of bodybuilding books and weightlifting, every kind of magazine. You could sit in his library and read them while you was waiting for them to get your machines in the truck or whatever you was using to haul them back. And so I'd sit up there. I'd rather go over and read them magazines than do anything else. And then, and that's what happened, and I met some other characters there, coaches and so on and so forth, that I can't remember their names, but it was a fantastic place and to just visit and see and the things they had. And they still have a neck clinic, and those guys, all those guys back then were hardcore lifters that were involved with equipment like that. But nowadays it's businessman. You got to be a businessman more than you got to be a know-how and with years of experience in weightlifting.
I had no machines at all till I was about 40, and it was mainly because I was training people. But for my own training, I never used any machine except for the universal, seated cable row and pull downs, and everything else was barbells. But once I got into the training business, Kim Wood gave me a great deal. He sold me a used hammer leg press that I still have. I think he sold me that thing about 20 years ago. I still have it. It still works great. So, Kim was real good to me. He gave me some good deals on some other machines I bought too, and he also sent me a client that played for the Bengals.
Well, he's an incredible. He's a guy that's got an incredible history, just like you. There's not many of those. I mean, I've been around things and done things because of my age and because I love what I do. But you guys have been somewhat collectors, either in your mind of the history of this thing, much better than me, or Kim Wood has got, and not only equipment, but books and everything. I wished I would have done that, but it seems like I just literally gave away a ton of stuff over my life. because for the thing that made me give a lot of stuff away, good equipment, was I didn't have a building big enough to keep it in, because I just kept buying stuff. But I'd have to get rid of some. I had stuff at I had a Nautilus inflametric bench press machine. Well, I bet you didn't make a dozen of them. Arthur Jones had changed things constantly. And I remember I was at a clinic one time, and up there in Indianapolis, and it was sitting around a table, a bunch of guys, and they was talking about equipment. And I said something about having an inflametric bench press machine. Well, this guy collected equipment, and he almost jumped across the table. I said, well, I don't have it anymore. I said, I cut it up and tried to redesign it. I didn't like it. And he like to die. But I was always doing something with a machine, you know. Taking it apart and trying to do this or that. I mean, I was too dumb to do that. I didn't have that know-how.
In my early days of training, those hammer strength guys helped me a lot. I used to call there all the time. I used to talk to Bill Jacobs and Tom Profit and Stoney Albert and Ted Lambrinides and Kim Wood and Gary Jones, all those. I used to call them all the time in the 90s when I was first starting out, and they helped me a lot. Then Kim Wood still sends out these packages. I mean, I haven't got one recently, but over the years he's sent me tons of packages just out of the blue. You get a package in the mail, and it's filled with some type of old course or something that he has. He just sends it to you for free. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, his son too is into all that, and of course his son, he's got to be proud of that boy, because he's a big, nice-looking kid. Played college football, and he's real. His dad's a typical weightlifter, that impulsive. You can see jump right in the middle of stuff, and but his son is more, a little bit more logical, college type, you know, but a big, strong man, very impressive.
Right.
But he's not like his dad. I can see that.
Yeah, John.
He's got a nice family.
Yeah, I've talked to John on the phone a few times. He's smart. He's a smart businessman.
Yeah, you can tell that. Yeah.
I gave him my mailing list. When he first started out, I think he was still in college or just getting out of college, and he was working for Roger LaPointe at Atomic Athletic, and I gave him my mailing list, you know, back then, when no one even heard of him practically. But he's unbelievable now. His website is unbelievable. His products, I mean, he's doing great. He's a smart guy. Yeah,
he is. And like I said, you can see he's very level-headed. Probably, if they were the same age, him and his dad running around at 18-year-old kids, his son would have to say, "Now, Dad, be cool," because Kim Wood jump right in the middle of something. I can see that. Pretty tough guy, like I said. He's got second in the state in wrestling. I got a lot of respect for wrestlers because I trained so many from a high school here that was the winningest high school in history of Indiana. In fact, yesterday I watched the high school state championship, and the kid I trained, Joe Lee, won the state. And the Lee brothers, there's three of them. And one's at Penn State, and this one's getting ready to just skip out of his senior year. He's got all these credits. He's going straight to Penn State. And I think, how awesome can these guys be? But anyway, you know, weightlifting, again, is something that most guys, I don't think, recognize, you know, how much you fall in love with it. I mean, it is one of the most addicting things that I've ever been around. And it's a good addiction. I mean, there's bad addictions and there's good if you use it right.
Dick, did you ever meet Ted Lambrinides when you were there at Hammer Strength?
If I did, again, I can't remember. And, of course, for some reason, you'd think I would, because I remember meeting some old coach down there at Hammer Strength, an old football coach that worked for him. But I can't remember their names. And, of course, I'd get so excited, even when I was older, about getting a new machine. I know this sounds crazy, and it's probably unbelievable to most people. I'm in the gym business when, at one time, we were the only ball game in town and had so many customers we didn't want any more. I'm telling you, we didn't want any more. But I wasn't interested in making money. And my partner, I kept buying machines. And then I get rid of the ones we had if I thought wasn't as good, to get another one. He finally says, and he says, look, I'm not want to do this like this. He says, I want to make some money for myself. All you want to do is buy machines. So I just literally made a deal with him without really sitting down and doing it. Okay, you collect the money. You stay up here on this desk. You can make most of the money. I'm going to buy machines with what I got. And I really didn't ever make any money in the gym business. I done what I like to do. If you like cars or whatever it is you like, I like machines. I want to tell you the truth.
Right.
Some of the happiest days of my life were waiting for a machine to get there. I mean, yep. I loved them, you know. And our barbell, I remember one time we were doing negative resistance. Kim Woods one taught me into it, but basically where, you know, you would just lift the weight up like on a leg extension, then let it down real slow, and then 2 or 3 guys would lift it up for you. I took this leg extension and welded a stainless steel bar across the back so we could stack plates on there. And then these guys would do it. It's a wonder we had any knees left. But they would do it real slow, a negative resistance leg extension, while we loaded, we'd have all these plates loaded on there, plus the weight, a full weight stack, which probably is around 250 pounds. And I had, when I started doing these negative things, we needed more plates, and I called York and ordered like 50-pound plates. We couldn't hardly walk. The place wasn't that big at that time. We got a bigger place later, but we bent that front of that Nautilus leg extension, we being those guys, not me. And Nautilus had this, and it's a new leg extension with a cam in it, and the legs went underneath for the leg extension because we're doing these negatives. But, I mean, that was what was exciting to me. Always something new, always trying to find a better way. And, you know, I've heard you say it and other guys, it all works. And it does. And
that's right.
If you know, so, and a barbell is a great tool. Arthur Jones, you know, he said, he never said, like, I don't want to quote one guy that I've read here recently about how Jones run down the barbell, basically. He never run down the barbell. He said it's far too good a tool for most people.
Right. I know that. A lot of people misquote him on that. Yeah, before we move on to the next question, I wanted to say one thing, too, because Ted Lambrinides, he also sent me tons of packages. He sent me, it's amazing, like he would do this research, and regularly, like it wasn't once every 6 months, it was almost every month. I mean, for many years, at least 10 years, when I was in D.C., I would get this package filled with all kinds of research stuff and everything else. Almost every month I'd get this thing from Ted Lambrinides. I couldn't believe it. And he would send it out to lots of people. So he did a lot of, you know, work for free just to help people. So he's a great guy.
Well, again, he loved it. He loved he loved the sport. And there was more of that back then, and that you could write a whole book as to the way it is now. I mean, I cannot go in a gym without somebody saying, well, that guy, does he use steroids over? And I want to holler at him and say, my goodness, can't you look at him and tell? You know, I mean, it's so confusing now.
Right.
And
that's the thing now. Is there's overload of information. It's like it's almost worse, but we have way better equipment. We have way better knowledge. But the problem is the good knowledge and the good equipment for beginners, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, because they get so much other confusing BS out there that even though we have great gyms and great equipment and great nutritional information, we have great everything, but they're being practically drowned out by all the negative stuff, the quackery.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's very confusing, and it always has been. You had to wade through. You know, you got to wade through things, but I mean, again, Muscle Smoke and Mirrors books will give a guy a good education, and how, you know, about all the drugs and all this stuff. But you know, I'm an old man now, almost 80, and you know, when you get older, you're going to have some aches and pains. I don't care who you are. I've never met anybody hardly. I mean, there are some that don't. And yet I see people walking around so bent up and twisted, they look like they're, I feel so sorry for them, because I think some of them I might be able to help or could have. But anyway,
We'll be back with more right after this.
This segment brought to you by VitalNutritionStore.com. Did you know that more than 7 million Americans suffer from coronary heart disease, the most common form of heart disease? Regardless of your age or condition, adding Cardio for Life to your daily regime will dramatically improve your cardiovascular condition. Cardio for Life has been the top-selling L-arginine product in the marketplace now for more than 3 years. It is also the top-selling product at VitalNutritionStore.com. Formulated by Dr. Harry Elwart, the best-selling author of Let's Stop the Number One Killer of Americans Today, Dr. Harry believes together we can prevent and reverse heart disease. Cardio for Life comes in 3 wonderful flavors: orange, peach, and grape, and is gluten-free, sugar-free, and sodium-free. Please see our complete line of natural products at VitalNutritionStore.com. That's VITAL Nutritionstore.com.
Randy Roach shocked the world with the release of his first volume of Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors several years ago. It was a masterpiece of over 500 pages with such in-depth research and detail that it was not only surprising, but shocking and mind-blowing. It was truly one of the best Iron Game history books ever written. He followed that with Volume 2, another epic book with over 700 pages of equal depth and detail. All serious Iron Game fans need to have these books. Please visit Randy's website at randyroach.ca. That's RANDYROACH.ca.
Listen to how Iron Game legend and the Iron Master editor Osmo Kehaw describes the book Supernatural Strength. Have you ever wondered how much real-world experience authors have when they write books about weight training? Who is that person behind the computer? What do they really know about the Iron Game? If you picked up this book, Supernatural Strength, you have definitely come to the right place. The author, Bob Whelan, has spent several decades in the Iron Game trenches training himself, competing and coaching in powerlifting, earning academic credentials too numerous to mention, and thousands of hours of training and instructing athletes and trainees of all levels at his Washington, D.C. gym since 1990. He's not only devoted his life to motivating and pushing people to heights they have never been to, but elevating the trainees' understanding why certain methods work better than others. Bob is one of the most respected and revered trainers in the business today. This book is sure to surprise and amaze you at the same time. Order now at supernaturalstrength.com. That's supernaturalstrength.com.
Don't you think it would be so much easier getting into shape if you had a personal coach? Just like all the celebrities do. Well, now you can. Bob Whelan of webstrengthcoach.com wants to get you out of your rut and coach you to success. He's dedicated to helping you achieve your strength and fitness goals through your hard work and his expert guidance. Bob will help you with strength training, muscle building, fitness, nutrition, and motivation. He'll make sure you achieve your maximum physical potential. You can get one-on-one training with Bob through his website, webstrengthcoach.com. He will develop a personalized program tailored to your individual needs. A program right for you. Bob will give you feedback after every workout. This is old school fitness and nutrition. No fads and no gimmicks. Bob will use proven natural techniques to make sure you are satisfied. So visit webstrengthcoach.com today and let Bob help you reach your best self. webstrengthcoach.com.
Do you enjoy history without social engineering? Reading about our founding fathers? Economics from a capitalist perspective? Wisdom from modern patriots? Welcome to UncleSamBooks.com, where virtues like rugged individualism, hard work, and the American dream dominate. UncleSamBooks.com. Great books for homeschooling. UncleSamBooks.com.
If you want to become as strong and muscular as possible with health in mind, and without lowering yourself to using steroids, the best advice can be found in the classic strongman books of long ago. These are the best books ever written on the subjects of strength training, weightlifting, strongman training, Iron Game history, and old-time physical culture. Many of them can still be found at physicalculturebooks.com. There you will find good, honest, time-tested wisdom from the great old-time strongmen. To maximize your natural muscular and strength potential, please visit physicalculturebooks.com.
Listen to Ken Manny, head strength and conditioning coach at Michigan State University, describe the book Iron Nation. A masterpiece text on some of the most intriguing and compelling personal stories, Iron Game history, and gut-wrenching training routines ever put to paper. If you truly love hard training without all the frills of pomp and circumstance so common today, you will love Iron Nation. Written by lifters for lifters. If you love weight training, you will love Iron Nation. Order now at ironnation.com. That's IRON nation.com.
If you would like to promote your business on MindForce Radio, we would love to hear from you. Please let us know if you are interested in a 30 or 60-second voice commercial or a banner website ad. Please contact Bob using the contact information provided on mindforceradio.com.
You're listening to Natural Strength Night on MindForce Radio.
This is the perfect time to bring up peary-rader, because I know that you've told me before that you grew to love Perry's advice much more in your later years of training. Could you please explain what you meant by that?
Well, peary-rader was a guy that knew a brief, hard workout. Now, he learned it over a period of time, and he even wrote on it, but the magazine itself did not influence me until I was older. And when I was very young, it wasn't colorful like Joe Weider's magazines, and, presented this Hollywood image of if you lift weights, this and that, and all the kind of things, you'll be happy, you'll have this, you do that. I don't know. But that wasn't peary-rader's way. Peary-rader was probably as honest as anybody that's ever been in this game. And his book was very little print. It didn't have this big colorful magazine and so on and so forth. But it took me so long to see the end, of what these guys were teaching. But peary-rader, I'll go so far as to say, maybe had too brief. His idea of training, most people don't know, but I'm sure you do. He said he never really gained anything at all for, I think, about 8 years. And then he went to twice-a-week training, which is what I would tell almost anybody nowadays. I would never tell anybody, like in Joe Weider's magazines, train 6 days a week. I mean, some of the most ridiculous. I was on a routine Joe Weider recommended, and bless his heart. I don't know who was writing for him, but like 10 sets of power cleans. And like you worked out 4 times a week and you done 10 sets of deadlifts and 10 sets of benches. Like you done 50 sets on Monday and then 50 sets on Tuesday and then you rested on Wednesday and you done it over again. It's insane for an average guy. And anyway, I remember reading peary-rader said train twice a week, period. But I would never believe that back until I went through an educational process of injuries, sickness caused by overtraining, and so on and so forth. I was convinced that you had to train almost every day and you had to do set after set. Another thing that peary-rader emphasized was the squat flat-footed, not with your heels on a board. Now, he wasn't perfect in his education. There's some information out there now that's really good on how to squat. And I don't like to recommend a squat to a guy that don't know how. I really would recommend a leg press. If you don't know how to squat, you better find out, because it can wreck your back, it can wreck your knees, but done correctly, it's still a tremendous exercise with a barbell, but so is a leg press. And you know, I don't like to teach even the deadlift by just talking about it. It's fairly hard to teach and so on and so forth. But anyway, peary-rader was a guy that recommended highly for the average and below average guy to train only twice a week and to do. And at one time he had recommended a 20 rep squat. And of course, before he done the 20 rep squat, at one time I think he was doing a press behind the neck, and the chin up, and then he recommended a few years later the bench press, bent over row, and 20 rep squat. But, you know, one of the chondromalacia is was one of my first problems caused by doing squats with my heel on a board. And when your knees go way over too far, and it causes wear and tear of that cartilage underneath your kneecap, and so on and so forth. And it will not build the hip strength and hamstring strength of a flat-footed squat, and so on and so forth. But Perry recommended that very brief workout. Well, you couldn't have made me believe that when the first few years. Again, the bench press is a great exercise, but you got to know how to bench press, or else you're going to have shoulder problems. I have never seen anything. Of course, one of the things about the bench, it's been so overdone that people think it's a bad exercise. It's not a bad exercise. It's just you got to know how to do it, and you don't want to be doing like I used to do, wide grip, 10 sets of benches, bouncing them off your chest, et cetera, et cetera. You want to do them right, but the press, too, I don't see many guys doing any kind of overhead press. I still say it's a great shoulder exercise, and but again, none of them that are that bad. But you got to know how to do them, and you got to know that again. Hey, twice a week's all you need. And if you're on steroids, you ain't gonna listen to me anyway. And you don't need, any advice if you're going to get bigger, because all you got to do is pump up. I mean, I realize that once a guy gets on steroids, he don't need no advice. He just pumps up. And
if they're on steroids, we don't even want them to listen to this podcast.
Well, they're not going to listen
Maybe
anyway.
They can listen. We might convert them, but I mean, I look at them as the enemy.
Well, I look at them as somebody stealing.
Me too.
You go in a gym and you steal all the things that these other guys are working the right way for. And but again, I got buddies. I got to know a lot of these guys. Some of them are the nicest guys you ever meet. And so I just got to say, well, that's their choice, and I ain't going to. The other night, when I was down at the pit, this big guy, he's a monster. I'd say he's about 400. Squatted over 9, and right there in the gym, and they got the equipment down there to do so. He's a big, powerful man anyway. But his buddies are on this stuff. But when you get to know them, they're just a bunch of nice guys. But again, the one thing I would beg them to do almost, don't try to compete against these guys that's not on drugs. Stay away from that compete. But invariably, they have caught people down there at the pit that will jump in the middle and catch them. If you had the money, you can catch more than one. But the contests are not as big as they used to be. There's more organizations, and they do catch people. And lo and behold, I was training a guy, and I swear to goodness, I never thought he was on it. I never thought he would get on it. And so he's competed. And we went to different contests. It happened to me twice that I didn't know about. And anyway, one admitted it to me some years later, and he was a strength coach in college strength coach. He admitted he had used it, which I appreciated him telling me. And then this other guy got caught, and I was stunned. I couldn't believe it, because he's as old as he was and so on and so forth, had a family, yet he got on this stuff. And then it wasn't very long thereafter, he tore his shoulder up bad. It's really dangerous powerlifting using steroids. Bodybuilding ain't so bad because all you do is pump up nowadays. They don't have to use heavy weights, and they shouldn't because they're going to wreck their body. But anyway, I know I got off on a tangent about drugs.
No, that's okay. Hey, Dick, please describe some of the times that you met Bob Hoffman and John Grimek.
Well, the first time that I met Bob Hoffman was up there at York, Pennsylvania, and Grimek was up there too. I guess the place is still there. It's it was a nice museum that Bob Hoffman literally built. I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on up there at York. If they, somebody's building that place more, taking care of it.
Well,
I mean,
it's getting better now. It really fell down there for a while, like in the 90s, or after Bob Hoffman died. I think it changed ownership a few times. It was really bad there for a while when bars were breaking, and it was just sad. But what I've heard, they have a new owner who's well, I don't think he's new. He's been there a while, but the current owner, I guess, is really doing a good job. I've heard he's trying to bring it back, and so far, I mean, I've heard good news that it's coming back.
Yeah, well, that museum up there is quite interesting to a weightlifter, and I was up there with a whole teenage team. One time we were going up to New York area to compete. We competed in New York. Leishner and that group up there had a powerlifting meet right in the middle of New York City. Probably would never be another one there because the money it cost to have one. And Leishner evidently knew somebody in a hotel, rather fantastic. And then up above New York City there, about 10 Mile, another place where they had the deadlift nationals and really some nice contests. But, anyway, we competed up there. But we stopped by York. We go out of our way, stop by York several times. I stopped by there with a teenage team, and lo and behold, we run into Bob Hoffman, and Bob was he was old. He was older than I am now, and he.
What is this, in the early '80s or something like that? Late '70s.
Let me see. It probably we competed as a teenage team from '75 up to the middle of the '80s.
He died somewhere, I think, in the mid '80s.
Well, he was up there. I mean, he was a big man too, and of course, met him there. He was real friendly, and we talked with him. And then he also, the Heart of America. There was a contest called the Heart of America. George Turner run in St. Louis. George Turner was a real good friend of Joe Gold. They were. George Turner made equipment. It was really good stuff, but George was not a very good businessman. He's kind of a typical old-time weightlifting that owned a gym, and his gyms were really good equipment, and he run this contest, and he knew everybody. And some way he had Bob Hoffman at that contest with that Olympic lifter. Again, I can't tell Arzo, can't pronounce his name. He was an Olympic. I think he was an Olympic gold medal winner. He was with Bob Hoffman, and Bob Hoffman used to wear all them medals on his chest. I don't know where he got them. He'd have a jacket on and have these medals on there. And then he was at the Heart of America, and Joe Weider was there too with Mike Mincer. And I mean, these two guys were almost. They're touching each other, and of course I heard they were enemies. I don't know if they really were that much of enemies, but they wrote things about each other as people would have thought they were, but they George Turner was so well known by those guys, and he had this contest, and I mean everybody was there in the powerlifting world, and I can't remember. Go just a second. I'm run back up there to York. I also wanted to see the old gym, and they hadn't where they trained. Well, it wasn't there at the museum. It was in another place, and it was across town, kind of there in New York. And I went over there, and I can't think of the name of the guy. He was also an Olympic coach, along with Bob Hoffman, and he was a real nice guy. And he showed me around that place. And so on and so forth. But no, it wasn't Turpak. This guy primarily was remembered for his coaching. I don't know how good he was at Olympic lifting, but he,
Dick Smith.
There you go. That's him. And he showed me all around and showed me the old trophies. He had a whole bunch of old trophies, fantastic trophies, some of them in a room all by themselves, kind of just stacked over that nobody could see them. And they were putting them together later, I think, to put over to the museum. But I know the Shah of Iran had given him some trophies for some kind of weightlifting guns. They were unbelievable looking things. Looked like they had emeralds in them and everything else. But anyway, I went over there. But Grimek, the time that I can remember meeting Grimek the best was I'm out to the 1984 Mr. America contest in Pasadena, and I'm in this hotel, and I standing waiting for the elevator door to open up. And the door opens up, and there stands John Grimek. And the thing that got me the most, it shocked me the most, and I know I'd seen him before, but the thing that shocked me the most is the man had his bone structure. I mean, he had a big, powerful head on him, and of course he had wrist and everything else to match. John Grimek could have been a monster. Now, he never really wanted to be. I think what I mean by monster, it's hard telling how big he could have been. I've read where he said he tried all kind of ways not to get his legs bigger. He'd done high reps and low reps and everything else because he didn't want his thighs any bigger. Didn't want big pecs muscles. Didn't hardly train him, but he was a guy that was very impressive in that area. And anyway, a little bit later, probably in the same day, and I just spoke to him then. We were at where they were warming up or something for the Mr. America, and I'm back there, and I run in, and John again started talking. A real friendly guy, and we got to talking this and that and what have you. But like I said, that was 1984. And you couldn't keep from liking John Grimek. He was as down to earth, and yet when he said it, he reminded me again of some of those guys. Leo Stern was the same kind of guy. When he said something, you listened because out of respect and the way they said it, they had a lot of confidence in themselves, and they were they'd have made good leaders in any area. But he was a great guy, and probably, flexibility, strength, and what have you. It's hard telling what he could have been if he'd have used his stuff like these guys do nowadays. But he was a great lifter, a great bodybuilder, that one who could have had much bigger areas in his body. I mean, he could have had the freaky thighs that some of these guys have got nowadays. And
but that's the reason we love him so much is because he didn't use it. I don't even like to think that what he could have been if he used it. I wouldn't like him then. I love him more now because I know that he was all natural.
Right. Yeah. He, but I remember at the 1982 Mr. America contest, he was there, and that was up there in the East Coast somewhere. I had a guy that I had in both 82, 83, and 84 Mr. America, Wayne Martin. He should have won, but there's a reason he didn't. And I'm not talking about he should have won the overall Mr. America. He should have won his height class. He was a black kid. Right. He had it all. But anyway, he got fourth in the first contest. Well, he was the youngest guy in there, and I knew we could do it if he would. But we had problems, and eventually we had to kind of fell apart. But I haven't seen him for years. I never seen him since about 1984 after the last Mr. America. Because of problems we had. But anyway, there was an article in the newspaper the next day after the 1982 Mr. America, and he was asked, said, what percentage of these guys use steroids? He said 100%.
Right.
That's how outspoken he was about it. He says 100%, and so
Yeah, Grimek was such a nice guy because, in 1976, I went and visited York, too, just like you, and I went to the gym afterwards, which was in a different building, and I saw the museum, and I've wrote about this several times, but one of my regrets is I didn't get to meet Bob Hoffman. He wasn't there that day, but I did get to meet John Grimek, and it was one of the highlights of my life, is going up into his office and sitting there with him for like a half hour, and it was awesome. He asked me as many questions as I asked him, and he was very friendly, very nice guy. I mean, he wasn't trying to get me to leave. I finally left because I wanted to let him get back to work after about 30 minutes, but he's an extremely nice guy.
Yeah, he was that's what he impressed me with. That he, just what you said, he would ask you questions, he would respect you, and he would want to know what you had to say. And
yeah, I got this big picture that Vic Boff gave me. It's a poster of John Grimek, and I got a museum frame, with the glass that protects it from getting damaged. It's like a museum quality frame. I put the autograph that I got from John Grimek when I visited him in 1976. I put that autograph on the bottom of that picture, and I guard that with my life. That's been in my gym for years, and now it's in my house now. But it's so cool to have. It's the equivalent of a baseball player visiting and getting the autograph of Babe Ruth.
Right. I used to ask questions sometimes back in of people who were in this game, and in a way to get their answer as to what I thought they believed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember this bigger than life. I asked Arthur Jones. I said, we were talking. I says, John, and at that time I hadn't met John Grimek. I says, and of course the photography back then and all them things was different too. And anyway, I said, he wasn't as good as he claimed, was he? He said, yes, he was. I mean, I remember Arthur Jones came back, and he just told me right up front, yes, he was. And so I didn't say anything. I was trying to find out more than anything because I hadn't met him, and I didn't. And I'd met Bill Pearl and seen him face to face, and he'd sitting across the desk and talk to him and all that.
Yep. Dick, did you see Arthur Jones put someone through a workout, or did you just see him talking to him?
No, I never did see him put anybody through a workout. No.
Oh, okay.
And I've been to clinics, where he spoke too. I was at a clinic up there in Cincinnati where he spoke after Casey Viator left him. He was so mad. Now, I'm telling you, it's funny, but he was so mad when they introduced him, and Jones would stay up all night, and talk. I mean, he probably, from what I understood, he needed a couple hours sleep a night at the most. He just wasn't, sleeping wasn't his game. You got to,
just like Dr. Ken.
Yeah, well, the thing about Jones is, he smoked cigarettes all the time and drank coffee, and he still lived to be about 80 years old. He done pretty good for a guy that never had a good meal in his life, I don't think. And and he was shot. According to him, he shot 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And he was quite a character. And but always carried a gun and so on and so forth. But
I heard stories that sometimes he used that gun when he put people through workouts, but as a prop, like go to failure and it put the gun to you. But I've heard all kinds of stories. I know he could be vicious when he put people through workouts. He would use any psychological tactic and do anything that he could to extract, maximum effort out of you. I mean, I guess that was, I never saw him train. I never met him, but that's the stories I've heard. So you probably heard some of the stories.
I don't know. I've heard, how stories are.
Right.
I had a story about me like that. Arthur Jones, from every story I've ever heard about him and everything I've ever seen when I was around him a few times, was he's, I believe he carried a gun all the time. And you know how it is. And there's a whole bunch of guys do that. Having been a policeman, policemen get, they get, just like guys that's been in combat, they're afraid the next door neighbor's after them, and so on and so forth. But, anyway, weightlifting world's had all kind of characters.
Right.
I was thinking, I met Mickey Haggerty one time, and James Manfield was with him, and on that island. When I was in the Navy, I was in the Navy and the Army, but I was on an island, Marshall Islands, and Mickey Hager come over to our little gym, and he showed us how to do some things, and we knew already, but he was Mr. Universe, and Jay Mansfield's right there with him. She's in this little old nasty gym, right with old Mickey Haggerty and Haggerty, however you pronounce his name.
Please revisit the time that you met Vince Gironda.
Yeah, he was quite a character too. All those guys were my kind of guys as far as respecting them. I mean, they were different, but, I could have trained at any of them's gym, learned a lot. And, of course, you hear about these places back then, and I was at Vince's a couple of times. And anyway, one time the second time I was there, we was going to Mr. America. Maybe it wasn't. Yeah, second time I was there, we was going to Mr. America contest. And I had the kid I was training, and so he was as good enough to be in that gym and stand out, so on and so forth. But now there's two different times I was there, but this time, one of the guys with me who was an engineer, he said, "Man, this stuff." Now I'm telling you, Vince Gironda's gym was not. It didn't even have any lights. I don't think it had a skylight, and in that part of California, I probably didn't need any heat. Maybe a little air conditioning. I don't know if they even had that, but I mean, this place was very small and average, but it was well known throughout the world. And anyway, this guy was. You could hear anything anybody said in there. That's how little it was. And he says, "This stuff's all homemade." This guy, well, Vince Gironda thought it was me. Man, he came after me like a wild man. And I hollered at him. I said, "I didn't say nothing. That wasn't me that said that." Well, he got carried away a little bit. But then I had another buddy's with us. He's Cool Hand Luke. He says something to Vince. He says, "Vince, can I hit your picture?" Man, it was almost like it was fixed that way so I would get out of trouble. Well, Vince had a little mirror in there, and you'd have to see where it was at in the gym. But it was right there close to where he stood all the time. So he runs over the mirror, and he had a real good-looking head of hair, thick for his age, He combed his hair, and he turned around with that Vince Gironda flex he gave. And my buddy took a picture of him, kind of got Vince off my back. And I was in there another time. Me and some guys took a trip. We took a trip, me and three other guys. We was going to see as many gyms as we could throughout America. That was in 1981, I think it was. And we traveled 17 days. We went all the way down to San Diego, all the way up the coast. And we'd stop at gyms all the time. Anytime we'd find a gym. In fact, that one guy that you knew was out there, I think, in Omaha. And
Champion
but anyway,
Charlie's in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, there you go. Champion Charlie's. You got it.
Yeah, I've been there. I trained there. One of my good friends in the Air Force, he was stationed at Offutt, and I went to visit him, and we trained there a few times. I mean, that's where he regularly trained. When I was visiting him, we had a couple of workouts there.
But I mean, that was Gironda, and of course those guys back in. Leo Stern was the same way. I asked Leo Stern to spot me on the bench. He said, "Get one of those guys to spot you." And I thought, man, I didn't ask him nothing anymore. Well, he didn't have time to be spotting every Tom, Dick, and Harry. He was running a business, and
if you run a gym business or even a personal training business, and you're doing strength training the right way, like the way I do it or the way you do it and the way a lot of guys we know do it, you kind of have to be that way at first. Like when people first call me, I'm a little rough on the phone too, because most people don't know anything, and they're a pain in the ass. So you just gotta weed out the people, and finally, once you talk to them a little bit, your respect gets bigger as you talk to them and as you get to know like what they know. The way I am right now, it's like I don't need to train people that much. I just want 3 or 4 people that aren't going to waste my time and be a pain in the ass. So if I have like 3 to 5 people that I like, and I want them in my house, because now I'm just training a few in my garage and that's it. Yeah, that's fine. That's all I want. I don't want a big thing with a bunch of people in my house, So I'm kind of like that way now. I'm a little gruff on the phone. I can understand why they do that.
Oh, yeah, he had to. And, I mean, I've seen him jump on Bill Golumbic, who probably was the best built guy there, because Pearl had left and moved up. He might have been in L.A. that time, but he had another gym. Or he was up in Sacramento, or I think he was up there. But anyway, Bill Glumick was the best built guy in the gym, and he jumped on him just like a little boy, and it scared me to death. And again, I was about 18 years old, and I thought, man, he must really. I thought he was an old man to start off with. He was probably 38, and I was 18. You know how that is. 20 years different, right. But he was a young man, and I didn't think he worked out, of course, but he had a good build. Well, he was Mr. California. In fact, he was going to enter the Mr. America back then, but they wouldn't let him because, if you run a gym, the AAU considered you a professional, and it was illegal for him to enter, and so he didn't do it. But he probably would have been Mr. America. Good Olympic lifter, too, Leo Stern was. But I mean, that's the way they were. And I remember being in Joe Gold's gym, that world gym, that new one, and I said, there's two things I remember. It seemed like I could get in trouble everywhere I went. I mean, I'm a grown man by now for sure. And I said, can I look at your gym? He says, look at it. And so I started looking. But I remember the biggest sign in the whole place. I mean, this sign had to be 2 foot by 4 foot, hanging from the ceiling type sign. It said, if you don't know how to train, go somewhere else.
Yep.
I mean, that's the way they were.
I know you've said this before in one of your previous podcasts, but you said before that there are more good gyms in Evansville, Indiana, than there were in the whole country when you grew up. And we also heard Tommy Kono say, how he hitchhiked 120 miles round trip just to use an Olympic bar. And, I never saw an Olympic bar till I was in the military. Just the machines, and, I mean, you were lucky to find a gym, probably in your day. So, please, and everybody smoked cigarettes, too. I mean, everybody smoked. Coaches smoked, athletes smoked, everybody smoked. I mean, no one was behind lifting weights. Coaches were all against it. You were pretty much by yourself if you wanted to lift weights. So, and you're about 18 years older than me, so it's just it was a lot worse when you were growing up than when I was growing up. So, go over the night and day difference, how it was, when you were growing up trying to train, find good information and get equipment, compared to now.
Yeah, it was, like what you said, there's 10 places in this town better than anything California even thought about having. And California in New York City had, I think, Goldberg's gym in New York City and Leo Stern's in California at that time were probably the two top gyms. But, there was, if you go in a place, and the first time I seen an Olympic bar was Leo Stern's. Leo went back before the Second World War. He started before, he was Clancy Ross and him were buddies. And, he had an Olympic bar. Well, it was just almost unbelievable. Now, he had this nice set of dumbbells. You just didn't see anything like that. I mean, these guys nowadays have got everything. It's so overdone. The Pitt Barbell Club, I don't know how many machines it's got in it now. I mean, he's got so many machines. It's 4 times bigger than it was when I had it. It's in a different building. It's at least 4 times bigger, maybe 6 times bigger. And he's getting just like I got it. He's got so much equipment now that he's got to almost back off putting anything else in there without getting rid of something. I love them all. I wouldn't recommend them all. I mean, he's got I cannot name all the different brands he's got, and he's got a heck of an a powerlifting area, 3 places for deadlifting. He's got 5 or 6 squat cages, mono lift. He's got, just about everything. I don't know how many Olympic sets, but everybody's spoiled. I mean, this group's got to use a different bar to deadlift than this group. I mean, so they got different deadlift bars. They got different squat bars. They got everything. If you'd have jerked a guy out of 1955 and put him in there, he would have been stunned because, it's a great place to lift weights nowadays. But again, steroids ruins it because these guys take over a young person's mind, and they look and they see those guys, And I'm not running them down as far as being personable people. Some of them are nice as you get. But is that what it's all about?
When did you get your first barbell set? How old were you? And what book or what magazine or what was it that got you started? What gave you the interest? Did you just pick up a copy of Strength and Health, or how did that happen?
You know, I can remember having a couple of magazines. I got my first barbell set when I was a sophomore in high school. And Evansville had Earl Clark, who was a Mr. Universe, that went to Leo Stern's gym from Evansville. There was a guy that trained in his backyard in Evansville. They got pretty famous, and Earl Clark, and they built a little gym inside the YMCA. The YMCA detested it. They did not, but they had put enough pressure that they gave them a little room upstairs where they had some weights. And the guy that was in the business with me, Bud Downing, who literally run the pit when I run around training people in the gym, also trained there. But I got this set. I can remember this day them bringing it in, and this guy said, "Are you going to use this stuff?" It was that 110-pound barbell set, you know.
I remember I got my first 110-pound set when I was 13. I told my parents, please, make sure it's a York set. I didn't want a Sears plastic set, Ted Williams special. I wanted the York. It had to be York. So I was lucky that I got a York 110-pound set when I was 13. But I was doing Charles Atlas dynamic tension and dips between chairs and all kinds of calisthenics and push-ups and pull-ups and everything else from the time I was 10. And I had a little 10-pound dumbbell that I used. I didn't really know what I was doing with it. So I started working out since I was 10, but didn't really have a barbell till I was 13.
Right. Yeah, mine was Healthway. I remember the name now pretty clear, and I used it for a bit, didn't do it. Then I got into wrestling, and then I moved it outside, and I built me a thing outside, do chin-ups right in the backyard. I went and cut down a couple of trees and drilled a hole. My dad had one of those drills that you twist with your arm and I drilled a hole through it. I put these two trees about 3 foot apart and run a bar through there, And I do chin-ups outside, and I had my weights out there, and I built an incline bench, and that was when I was about a junior. Then some way I got away from them a little bit, and then I joined the Navy. And then I was playing softball on a aircraft carrier, USS Hornet, had a softball team, and I was center fielder. And the catcher, I know I've told you before, this guy's name was Jim Thacker. I never seen a guy built like him. Of course, he was real natural, and I didn't know anything about being real natural. But I said, "Man, where'd you get all that muscle?" He said, "I used to lift weights." Well, he wasn't that old, but he hadn't been lifting for. I said, "Well, you show me," and he showed me. And that was it. Man, I fell in love with it then. And again, I was on that aircraft carrier. I was about 18 years old, so I really got into it then, and that's when my whole history started. And we went to the Philippines.
You met Leo Stern. Yep.
Yeah, and a guy in the Philippines. I was at a little gym, a great little place in the Subic Bay, and that Filipino guy that run it told me, says, he tried to correct me on some things. I wished I'd have listened to him. Man, he was sharp, and I don't remember his name, but he was right about me. I was overtraining one area and not doing anything for the other, and so on and so forth. But anyway, there was another guy in there, and he said, "When you get back to San Diego, you go see Leo. He'll straighten you out. He'll help you." And so, but I didn't listen to Leo either.
Great,
Leo made me a workout, but I didn't like it, so I trained it. I remember telling Leo, I said, "I don't want to do that exercise. I want to do an arm exercise." He says, "That is an arm exercise, boy." I said, "Okay." I had a lot to learn.
Well, Dick, that's going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for your time. You gave us some awesome information and some real funny stories. And thanks again, Dick, for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you, Bob. You're always enthusiastic and a great guy to talk with.
Don't be a flamingo, you have to do your squats. Don't be a flamingo, real lifters work their legs.
Attention all serious natural lifters. Remember these two great websites, physicalculturebooks.com and webstrengthcoach.com. Write them down and visit them often. physicalculturebooks.com and webstrengthcoach.com.
That's going to do it for this edition of Natural Strength Night on mindforceradio.com. Please bookmark that website, mindforceradio.com. Bob is always looking for new writers for naturalstrength.com who are old school, hardcore, write with passion, and have a strong anti-steroid stance. He also wants your training questions so they can be answered on the show. Please send your articles and training questions to Bob at mindforceradio@earthlink.net. Thanks for listening. See you next time.